All right, so today we're doing the last two commandments and kind of finishing up the commandments. So the last two deal with coveting, and Luther really combines these last two. Because remember, God says in Deuteronomy and Exodus that there's 10 words he's given us, and he's either given us 9 or 11. And so the last two obviously are dealing with kind of the same thing. So the 9th and the 10th commandments is, the 9th one is, you shall not covet your neighbor's house. And then the 10th one is, you shall not covet your neighbor's wife, his manservant or his maidservant, his ox or donkey, or anything that belongs to your neighbor. So
or his car.
What?
Or his car.
Or his car. Yeah. That's right. I mean, that donkey or that sweet tractor he's got out there.
Yeah.
We get the Frederiches coming in here. Coming in hot. Let's see. There we go. They, and so.
Hi, Phil.
Hi, Phil. Yeah, he's coming in. He's working it out. There he is.
Hi, guys.
Hi.
Hi, Phil.
Running late. Sorry.
It's all right. We've been discussing other things, waiting on you, and we're like, they're gonna come.
Oh yeah, right.
So anyway, we actually did. We have been discussing other things, but we just started. So like,
You were talking about me. You were giving everybody else a break.
Yeah. So we have you shall not covet your neighbor's house or his wife, manservant, maidservant, all that stuff, his car. So what does this mean? That we should fear and love God so that we do not scheme, and that's the big word there. That we should not scheme, I think, and that's what Luther kind of connects to the coveting commandments. Is kind of that the way we translate it for the sermon is sneaky, being sneaky, kind of scheming to get your neighbor's inheritance or house, or get it in a way which only appears right, but helps to be of service to him in keeping it. I really like the definition that's in this one. It's like scheming to get your neighbor's things and doing it in such a way that it appears good and honorable, right? Like that whole scheming thing. So then the other one is, what does this mean? We should fear and love God so that we do not entice or force away our neighbor's wife, workers, animals, or turn them against them, but urge them to stay and do their duty. So so here's a hard question. Why is this commandment, why are these commandments here? And what makes them different than don't murder, don't steal, because they're very similar. They're very similar. So what do you guys think? What do you think?
Our motivation.
Motivation, but we also saw motivation in like don't hate someone. Like in the fifth commandment.
But this goes deeper. I mean, he was really brutal. One line here. For our natural instinct is that no one wants to see someone else have as much as himself.
Yeah.
I mean, that just cut to the, I was like, guilty.
Yeah. How it pains you to see someone doing better.
I think it goes back to the first commandment. To love your neighbor as yourself. Do unto others as you would have others do to you.
Yeah.
So if you try and steal or come on to his wife or anything else, that's not being a good neighbor. That's not loving.
Yeah.
According to what God has put before us. Yeah.
That's So that's and you know, and coveting is all kind of part of that. And so Lee was kind of hitting on it that we don't really like seeing someone do better than us, and Phil's kind of talking about that same idea. Is there anything else? Like what else is going on here? Oh, I can't stand up there. So one of the things that I like, and I like how Luther does this, is I don't know, it's kind of halfway through the Large Catechism, but and I don't know where I didn't make time to find it today in the other book, but but I like how he puts this. He says, "Thus, this last commandment is not addressed to those whom the world considers to be scoundrels." All right, so it's not addressing the scoundrels, which we kind of make people into scoundrels in the other ones, but like those are, it's kind of obvious, but precisely to the most respectable. So it's saying that this one is actually addressed to the most respectable, to those who look for approval as being decent and upright, and who have not offended against the foregoing commandments. Like, what he's saying is that this one is for the ones that are like, listen, I'm doing everything fine. I haven't killed anybody. I'm not doing all right. And it's going, no, you fall into this pit as well. Like that you in your appearing to be fine and holy, you're actually like desiring for all this other stuff, and that desiring can really, really like push us through to the next thing. I don't know, what do you guys think about that? Anything? So Gloria just said a lot of it's in our thoughts.
Oh, he went. We lost him.
Yeah. So she said, like, keeping up with the Joneses, and that's a big thing. Listen, I struggle with that a lot. With you see what other pastors are able to do with their voice and charisma, but they like that's what Mark and I were kind of talking about that, and we have a good thing going on out here right now, and he's like, man, that's a great ministry, and he's not really able to do something like that right now with his place in his church, and but he's got capital beyond belief in his place, like that's, and so it all adjusts and things like that. So
Doesn't society constantly also push us? You're not supposed to be, oh, you have an apartment? How come you don't have a house?
yeah.
Or what do you mean you only have a bachelor's? Why didn't you go for a master's? I mean, it's like the society is constantly saying, so it doesn't matter if you have a roof, it doesn't matter if you have a food, you need a bigger house and a bigger table.
You need the latest of everything.
Yeah. And you got to get it now.
Yeah.
Right. Doesn't matter. No.
You got to get it now. Well, I mean, you look at, everything that we, call holy in this country, it's mortgage, a couple cars,
Credit card debt.
Yeah. Like all those things that are, considered like, if you don't have them, it's not, you're not living up to your full potential, and you're weird if you're trying to live out, and you're almost considered like you're living in poverty when you're doing that, and everything's kind of set up around that, and so it sets up around this whole idea of coveting. Like, I need more and more and more and more and more. Like, is it ever going to be enough? And I think that's a good way of looking at this, because this, I really like how Luther puts it. It's like, it's for the very ones who think that they're honorable, the ones that are, that's like, oh, I'm fine, like that's, and it's right there, it's like, oh, nope, you're in this too, buddy. You're in this too. And I like how he always like turns it around to something positive, and says that, this is, it's not so much coveting after your neighbor's things, but it's actually not just not coveting, but making sure that his stuff is protected. You know, that it's like, oh, that's great that he has that, but I saw that, you know, he parked his new car a little too close to this one drainage thing or something like that. You know, I'll go tell him, or just, you know, anything like that. You know, like don't, and that's what's hard. I say,
What is it?
I think I'm guilty of this in this way. Okay.
That's what this is.
I'm guilty of this in this way. I say this a lot, and I say it very tongue in cheek, and I like this phrase, and I'm not going to stop saying this phrase because I do like it a lot. It's like, I say this: I don't believe in karma, but it's amazing how things work out. You know, that's how often do I say something like that when somebody's acting a certain way with something that they have that I may not? Does that make sense?
Mhm.
Like that's
Say this goes around, comes around. A lot of times you're really judging your neighbor when they're doing something.
You lost it. That's
yeah.
what I try to do.
So Gloria just said what always goes around comes around. You know, like that's
Yeah,
that phrase of like they're not doing something quite right. Like that's and how much, and I think it's inside of our hearts. Like there's nuance to this, because I do think, you know, I don't believe in karma, but it's amazing how things work out. Like that's is that same thing, you know. But how much of that is like almost a wish of ours that would happen to people?
Yeah, yes, yeah, just wait till it happens to him. That's the comment, yep.
Like when someone flies past you and then they get pulled over by the cop, you know?
Good, yeah.
Na, 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 na.
Yeah, and you feel this righteousness just burning from you.
There goes, but the grace of God go on.
And you feel, and you're just
Always
like,
good to see a busy cop with somebody else.
yeah. And so that's, yeah, I wonder if that, you know, we're almost kind of wishing evil onto that person. And that's where all this stuff is kind of complex, you know, and that's, and we can, I don't think there's a time when we can become like, well, here's the hard and fast answer. You know, it kind of depends on what our will and well wishes are for the people around us, and kind of, and constantly being open to discovering new ways to kind of notice our neighbors and see them and find new ways that we can love them. So that's, I don't know. Does anyone have anything to say about that? I have a scripture for us here in a
We
second.
just have to constantly watch ourselves, because it's so easy to fall into that.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, I find myself doing it at times, just saying, gee, I wish I had this. And I say, hey, come on, Lee, what do you want? You got a house, you got 3 rooms, you know, cut it out. We do it all the time.
Yeah. Oh, it's totally
It changes constantly,
yeah.
constantly.
And it can, and it's always that moving target, you know, like that moving target where
You got to be aware of it every
yeah.
waking hour.
And so that's what I like, is that he puts this as like, this is really for the one that really like, no, I'm fine, you know, but actually, you know, when we're sitting there thinking about something else, and we're falling to this. So I kind of have an interesting perspective on this. We're not using it for the sermon, but it's the Old Testament reading from this week, and it's Deuteronomy chapter 15. And I think it kind of deals a little bit with this. Deuteronomy chapter 15. Everyone's favorite book, Deuteronomy.
It's coming.
No, Numbers is more fun.
No, Numbers.
What verses?
Yeah.
What verses?
I have 12 through 18. I need to verify that real quick. Actually, we'll start off, we'll kind of do most of that chapter.
What chapter are you in again?
15.
15.
15.
12 through 18, or most of it anyway.
Yeah.
15 or 18. 15.
So, all right, so 15, and we're going to start with verse 1 and kind of go from there. And we might just do the whole chapter. But what I really want you to get is 12 through 18. That's kind of what we're really talking about. But this is all kind of talking about the same thing. So we'll listen to this. Taking forever to download. Come on.
Time.
Oh my goodness. Normally it takes like 2 seconds to download. What is going on?
Gotta pay a
It's
TV
time.
bill.
Especially 12 through 18.
What is going on? I can't blame one of your guys' pacemakers this time.
He's really.
They- they just
You want me to
stepped
play?
out.
Wait, you're gonna get to that
Be
age.
careful. Be careful.
You want me, Pastor, you want me to have my, you want me to have my phone read it?
Well, like it won't sound as good. I'll read it with gusto. All right. I'll read it with gusto. Let me get the camera back on me. So let's see here. The thing is, I don't have really any light. Okay. So Deuteronomy chapter 15, beginning with the first verse. And this, I have the NIV translation that I'm reading out of. So at the end of 7 years, let's see, is this Deuteronomy? Yeah. All right. At the end of 7 years, you must cancel the debts. This is how is it to be done. Every creditor shall cancel any loan that has been made to a fellow Israelite. They shall not require payments from anyone among their own people, because the Lord's time for canceling debts has been proclaimed. You may require payment from a foreigner, but you must cancel any debt of your fellow Israelite who owes you. However, there need be no poor people among you. For in the land the Lord your God is giving you to possess as your inheritance, he will richly bless you. If only you fully obey the Lord your God and be careful to follow all these commands I am giving you today. For the Lord your God will bless you as he promised. And you will lend to many nations, but will borrow from none. You will rule from many nations, but none will rule from you. If anyone is poor among your fellow Israelites in any of the towns of the land the Lord your God is giving you, do not be hard-hearted or tight-fisted towards them. Rather, be open-handed and freely lend them whatever they need. Be careful not to harbor this wicked thought. The 7th year, the year for canceling debts, is near, so that you do not show ill will towards the needy among your fellow Israelites and give them nothing. They may then appeal to the Lord against you, and you will be found guilty of sin. Give generously to them, and do so without a grudging heart. Then because of this, the Lord your God will bless you in all the work and in everything you put in your hand to. Then there will always be poor people in the land. Therefore, I command you to be open-handed toward your fellow Israelites who are poor and needy in your land. So here's our verse. It's connected to that though. If any of your people, Hebrew men or women, sell themselves to you and serve you for 6 years, in the 7th year, you must let them go free. And when you release them, do not send them away empty-handed. Supply them liberally from your flock, from your threshing floor, and from your winepress. Give to them as the Lord your God has blessed you. Remember that you were slaves in Egypt, and the Lord your God redeemed you. That is why I give you this command today. That verse 15 is important. All of this is under the understanding that you were once slaves. But if your servant says to you, I do not want to leave you because he loves you and your family and is well off with you, then take an owl and push it through his earlobe into the door, and he will become your servant for life. Do the same for your female servant. Do not consider it a hardship to set your servant free, because their service to you these 6 years has been worth twice as much as of a hired hand. And the Lord your God will bless you in everything you do. So, set apart the Lord. Let's see, every firstborn man with the Lord. Let's see. It's kind of the same thing. Set apart all the firstborn animals of the Lord, basically, and give those to the Lord. So kind of give the best of the stuff to the Lord. So yeah. So I don't know, what do you think of that chapter? It's pretty explicit. And when we first were coming up with this sermon series over a year ago, no, that was January. We came up with the sermon series in January. It's not explicitly about coveting, but I think it's all about coveting. So what do you think of this little section here?
Well, first of all, he said, if it's the other guy, it's okay.
The what?
If it's the other guy, it's okay.
Yeah.
I have to forgive the debt if you're a Hebrew, but if you're not, it's okay.
Okay. Yeah. So if it's a foreign, if it's a Philistine or something like that, don't worry about it, right? Like that's yeah. Okay.
Collecting your money.
Do what?
Keep collecting your money if he's a Philistine.
Yeah. Like that's, so it's kind of funny that's in there, right? Like that's
Yeah.
but I don't know. So what do you think this has to do with coveting? Like what do you think is going on this whole thing? Because I think it's dripping with it, or at least telling them not to covet.
Well, isn't it saying be satisfied with what you have?
10, is that?
And that is
Yeah.
shared.
You just finished going through Deuteronomy.
Yeah, I think it has a lot to do with realizing God's abundance. And actually, the sermon series after Jonah, the 4 weeks in Jonah, we're doing a stewardship sermon series, and
At the end of every 7 years,
Uh-oh.
you shall
There it
grant.
goes.
there it goes.
Wow.
It just finished downloading. It took forever. So we're doing we're calling it the party, but it's living in God's abundance. And that I think much of our coveting nature comes from an idea that we live in scarcity. That we live in this idea that there just isn't enough. So I need to hoard. I need to hold back, And it really seems like for God's people here, he's telling them, no, that's not the way. That's not the way. And he says that the way I was reading that is that to kind of not do those things is to kind of be breaking that last commandment and be coveting, to allow their fellow Hebrews to be poor, is this over there. I don't know. Does anyone else have any other thoughts before I ask my next question? It's still going to be about this.
That's what it said.
Yeah.
You shall open wide your hand to your brother, to the needy, and to the poor in your land.
Yeah. And the reason why is he says the land's got plenty. There's plenty, right? There's plenty because God is with you. So so here's my next question. Did they ever do this?
Symbolically.
So I'm sure some did some symbolically. Yeah, symbolically.
If you saw the poor guy sitting outside the gate who was crippled, on your way to services, you threw him a coin,
Yeah,
but you never picked him up.
yeah. So,
on the other side, what about all the do-gooders, the chief priests and etc. We're always better than the rest. We pray better, we eat better, we do all of this. And then, like Lee says, who's the guy sitting outside the gate that's almost starving to death?
So that's see, both of your points are really, really good points. And I think it goes back to that question of like, did they ever do this? And they never really did. They never really did. Like there's always, and I think that's beginning to erode the chinks in the trust in God, that they ended up being trusting in their own wealth and their own abilities and all that. But like when you look at the Gospels, going back to what Phil said, when you look in the Gospels, right when those stories about there's like a poor beggar sitting outside or a blind man sitting outside and Jesus heals him or something like that, it's usually centered around some other form of righteousness, as Phil's called them, the do-gooders. It's usually centered around them. And we've talked about this before in this Bible study, but I think the gospel writers are calling back to this, to Deuteronomy, to this sense of you once had nothing. You once were slaves, and I took you out, and now you're enslaving people again. Like, and by leaving people poor by those wash gates and all those things, these people are walking around in their glorious white robes with their green things in front of them and talking about how amazing they are, right? Like that's, and they're saying like, this is a sham kingdom. Like these guys talk about their righteousness, but like they don't care about this. And I do think it's interesting that, and I think by just reading this in church right now, I probably am violating some call document somewhere. Like this one's pretty scandalous, right? And that's because it's like, is this in the lectionary? Is this in the 3-year lectionary? No. Also, is Jonah in the lectionary? No. They like that's the there's a lot of things like that, and that this when you confront your congregation with this, when you confront yourself with this, you can kind of, you walk away and you're like, I'm not, and like immediately start to create every excuse in the book. And I think that's what Luther's kind of going for with his coveting stuff, right? Like, it's like, you desperately want to be righteous, but come on. like that's, and I think that's kind of what's going on there. Yeah. Like, is anyone else? And I really like the section about the freeing the servants too. Does anyone want to say anything about that? Did anything click there? Because I think it has
really a neat thing that they did every 7 years. If they had a slave, they let him go.
Yeah.
And he didn't have to do anything. If someone owed you money, it's done. You wait till the 7th year and say, can't pay you, and it's forgiven. So I think there's good and bad to that 7-year thing.
But did they
Just
really,
my own personal viewpoint.
Yeah.
What'd you say, Lee?
did they practice it, or was it just?
That's it. I don't know.
No, they didn't. Like that's ends up being the undoing of Israel, is the fact that they didn't practice these things. That's kind of that's so they began to, so you could see there that that God is creating an expectation for his people. Okay? That's what he's doing. And you could see that that's what he's doing by, you could still extract all the wealth out of the Pharisees, not the Pharisees, the Philistines and all these P words. They over there, but he's saying that my people are to be a glorious people. So don't let anyone have shame, basically. And if something happens to someone where they fall off the wagon, they have to become your servant for a little bit, because that's kind of how things work then, right? On that 7th year, release them, because they've given you, it says like, they're cheaper being your servant than having a hired hand. They've given you all kinds of things. So send them out well, send them out with a gift, you know? And the reason why we chose this with coveting is that I'm sure there's some people that practice this. There's some people that were righteous and practice this, that they just release them. And it's like, well, you're free now. It's kind of like when the South released all the slaves out of the South.
Absolutely.
Oh, you guys are free now. I don't know where you're going to work. I don't know what you're going to do. I don't know. We made all this money off of you, but like we certainly can't make sure that you're set up. Oh, so you guys can, you know, still work for us for next to nothing? Sounds good. You know, like and you know, that was probably the way it was done all the time. Like, yeah, no, we freed him. Yeah, he had to live under a bridge, but we freed him.
Yeah.
You know, that's so that's, and I think that's connected to coveting too. I don't know. I feel like I've said some controversial things.
No, not really. We do it even today. You know, you have kids that, okay, you're 18 now, you're out of the system, goodbye.
Yeah, that's, and so we go back to the nuance stuff, you know, because there's differences between pushing out of the nest and making sure that it'll be okay, right? Like that's definitely the case. And like I think there's some principles in here. Like I think when we make our poor today like rely on payday loan places, you know, that's a trap that they never get out from under, you know. Like it's when I was selling cars, the amount of people that would come in with something that was never worth anything hardly, and they had it for 3 years, and they had $8,000 of negative equity on it, and you know, and this car's worth $1,500, and they're paying a 20% auto loan, and I was just like over there, and it's these loan sharks dealing with people's ignorance on how it's people taking advantage of the poor to keep them poor.
And they want to roll that over into the price with the next car, right?
Yeah, because this one's falling apart and all that stuff. And it's just a cycle that keeps building and building and building.
Also, look at credit card debt, 24%, and people roll it over every month, and it does nothing but build.
Yeah. Well, I was upset. So, yeah, there's no way this has changed. There's been no legislation to stop this. We had a fair amount of credit card debt, and we kind of paid it off when some stuff happened, and when we paid it off, the month we paid it off, Bank of America changed how they charged us that last time, and they changed when the month we paid it off, they changed, and if they'd been billing us the same way they've been charging interest the whole time, let's say like interest would have been like $80, but suddenly they changed it, and that interest was $300.
Oh, jeez.
And that's like, and what they were doing is they were realizing what was going on, and so they had this means where they just changed the way they billed it that last time.
They wanted their extra bucks.
Yeah, it's the extra bucks, and I was upset at that.
Oh, I'll bet.
Like, yeah, we're working hard for this, and then all of a sudden, you know, you just change it up, and I couldn't do a thing about it. And so, and it was a lot of money. It wasn't like, oh, okay, it was $5. You know, it was. Yeah, she said people have poor credit. No. And so, yeah, and that's what makes it so hard. Like that's Like it's the credit rating, and that. But what's interesting is there's a vision being espoused here that says, no, you're better than that. You're better than that. And I think it's a vision that says, don't covet. You know, like don't covet after all of that. Let's see. I'll tell one more story. Remember Ferguson? Remember that big debacle that happened in Ferguson, Missouri? You know, that was right. We lived right by there in St. Louis. And there was a big study done as to find out why that place was such a tinderbox. And the reason why is the police office wanted more money. And so what they started doing is they started charging tickets for jaywalking.
Oh, gee.
And so they started charging all these tickets for jaywalking, and they were making all this money. But what that was doing is driving a wedge into the poor in the community, the people that are getting tickets for jaywalking, and versus everyone else. So when a cop pulls over Brown, it's another jaywalking ticket, you know? And so they driven a wedge in there, and the thing is it wasn't the local cops in that instance that had caused that. The local cops are just the ones that are having to implement rules, you know? It was the high ups, you know, that were the bean pushers that were causing the rift.
The haves and the have-nots.
Do what?
The haves and the have-nots.
Haves and the have-nots, and it's and kind of the study said that it was like they were trying to make money off the people that didn't have anything.
Right.
And that's and it ends up making like a tinderbox, you know, and I think we like you see that. I mean, like it happens all the time, and I think here it's calling us. You know, it's like God's people be different from that, you know, like let everyone have like inherent dignity. And I think that's got to start with us. And I think when we can do that, it's that light turned back on. Sorry guys, like the light that's been off the whole time just turned back on.
You must have said the right thing.
You said the right thing.
That light was coming, and it decided to reform its ways from all this preaching. But that's like and I think it has to like start with us, and where we realize it's like, you know, maybe I should look at something a little different. So that's kind of a heavy-handed way, but that's I think it has a lot to do with what we see here in the scriptures, and allowing ourselves to enjoy when someone else is doing well, or when someone is coming out of a rough time. And that's difficult, because sometimes we just want people to pay. It's like that person was speeding and they got, you know, and we treat that way with people with bad credit all the time too. And a lot of times, like, also when I was selling cars, now this is like back in the day, everyone that had garbage credit had the same thing. Their first thing, it was all the same. It was a Macy's $500 credit card. Everyone on their credit report that had garbage credit, every one of them had a Macy's $500 credit card.
Why did you bring that up?
And that was the start. And, you know, and how much money was Macy's making at the time? You know, like that's, and you're selling that stuff. And it's just, I don't know. I won't get into it. Like that's the, yeah. I looked at things differently back then than I do now. I look back now, because back then I was like, those stupid people getting those cards. And now I see it was just predatory. Like these people didn't know. It was free money to them. And it's just so you could fill a bottom line and destroying people's lives. So So the Ten Commandments. Let's close on the Ten Commandments. I only got a couple minutes here, and Phil mentioned this a second ago. A few seconds ago, that it all goes back to that first commandment: love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength. And then the others are like it: love your neighbor as yourself. So I want to ask, like, did you guys learn anything new or anything interesting, or as we've gone through the Ten Commandments here that you hadn't really considered before, or something that you were reminded of, or anything like that, kind of during this? Every time I go through it, I'm like, oh yeah. I don't know. Was there anything like that during this time for you?
Well, with all of your teachings, I think it makes us think about things a little differently than we have in the past.
Yeah, so make you think a little differently. Like that's good. That's good. That's my goal.
And in a lot more depth.
They're deeper,
Yeah,
right?
a lot more
than
depth.
so-
They're not so surface level. They're not so surface level. And that's that's what I like about them. That it's like, oh, when you allow yourself to go deep into them, you're like, oh my goodness, but
It forces you to look in the mirror.
Yes.
forces you to look
Yeah.
at it. That's a good way of putting it. Forces you to forces you to stare at yourself and go, maybe I'm not as righteous as I thought I was going to be.
Right.
Like that. And I
wasn't really.
and I think that's that's part of that living a confessional life. That when we realize that we're not quite as righteous, then we can look at our neighbors around us who we know aren't righteous. Listen, they mow their lawn at 10 o'clock at night, it's stuff like that. Like those people are just heathens over there. And it can slow us down just a beat on them a little bit when we realize that we're not so righteous. And I think that's a fundamentally Christian principle. We worship a guy who took the sins of the world to the cross, so it took all of our self-righteousness to the cross. So that's kind of thing. Gloria, you were about to say something. Whoop.
Maybe you can pray more for them than to look down on them.
Yeah. So she said it makes you more compassionate and to pray for your neighbor more than just looking down on them. And that's kind of my goal with this whole thing. And I kind of think that's part of the goal of the Ten Commandments. And I hope that I've been able to connect them to the Exodus story, because Deuteronomy and Exodus both connect them. Like, you once were slaves. You once were slaves. So flee all things slavery. And what we end up seeing is that Israel, they stop handling the debts. We see Jesus, like the stories of Jesus are all these poor people around, the Pharisees and stuff, and they're not doing anything about it. And it's like this broken kingdom. And we end up seeing in the book of Kings that Solomon is going after all these Egyptian horses, that they're using slave labor to build the temple. They've completely lost all things in order to all of this righteousness in order to build the things of holiness. And it's that says a lot for me as we do church things. Am I trying to get away with something by doing this or that? And it's a nuance. I don't know. Does anyone else have anything? Nothing? Well, I'm glad you guys got to see that it goes so much deeper and with all the commandments here. One of my confirmands once said that I feel like I've been lied to when I was teaching the commandments. I feel like I've been lied to my entire life. This is an 8th grader. But what I like about that is that he's actually listening and hearing all of that. And I told him, it's not that you've been lied to, it's that you're actually growing up. And that's, you're actually allowing the nuance of the conversation to come in. It's very rare that there's things that are like just hard, because we're soft people. Some of us are softer than others, but
We're fluffy.
yeah,
I like
exactly.
that. I like that better, Judy.
So that's
I've said that all my life. I'm just fluffy.
so I think our
And it's a nice fluffy.
yeah, easy. This is recorded. I don't need to.
Yes,
censor.
I know.
but it's
XX.
but yeah, I think it goes back to like realizing that we are soft, that we're not these hard things. So maybe we can be a little softer with people around us, and because that's what we want for ourselves. Is that when we need it, we want people to be loving and soft on us. So
It's also part of human nature to guard our hardness and softness.
Yeah.
Because there are individuals that take advantage of both.
There are, and I think that's why the community. Let's just say it, we're talking about canceling debts and all that stuff. Like, so the community needs to rally around and go, that guy's being a predator, you know, like those people are being predators. Like, don't have anything to do with them, you know. And so so we do that in a localized sense. We do that in like I think I was teaching Bible study when I got a call from my grandfather a few years ago. You know, this is my grandfather who died now, but he had fallen for one of those scams, and he was going and buying gift cards at Walgreens, and the guy at Walgreens goes, "Why are you buying these gift cards?" And he told him, and the guy at Walgreens went, "No, that's a scam. Don't do it." So that the guy at Walgreens actually like stood up for my grandfather, you know. And so that's something he didn't have to do. They could have made some sale there, you know, but he was standing up for that person. So that's good.
Pastor, I think that's one of the hardest things to do when you have friends who really don't believe as you believe.
Yeah.
And you're in a position where you either have to speak up or be silent.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a very hard road to follow, because a lot of times just saying I'm not comfortable with that, or I feel differently about that, it can literally put wedges between people.
Yeah. And that's a hard thing. And that's and that's why I think everything kind of about our faith is nuanced. Like it's hard to create a hard and fast rule for every situation. And that's why I think it has to do with each circumstance and discovering how we can love this person best in this thing. So that's where something I've learned a lot lately has been me wanting to be right, which I'm right all the time. Me wanting to be right isn't always the best thing for the relationship, you know. And so that's so maybe correctness isn't the goal, and maybe the relationship is, and so I think that's the nuance then, and I think we may find we are living more like Jesus when the relationship is the goal rather than just the correct living. Amen. And I think that's what we see in the commandments, is that loving God and then loving your neighbor. And I think that's where we are. I think that's where we are. But
Joanne and Ed coming back to Florida soon?
yeah, when are you guys coming back?
Joanne and Ed? Hello?
When someone buys us a ticket.
Okay.
I know you aren't, but I was talking about Ed and Joanne.
Joanne. Good night.
The The other end.
The other end.
We will be back the middle of January.
Okay.
Okay.
All
Why-
right.
Why aren't you coming back? You want somebody to give you a plane ride?
No. That's what's going on here with the grandkids right now. Every grandkid's involved in some kind of activity.
Yeah. Well, it's good seeing everybody. And thanks for joining us today. We'll do Jonah next week. That'll be really fun. And we'll go through there and we'll kind of see how this continues to evolve. But it's good seeing everybody.
Have a blessed week.
Help Ed.
Bye.
Bye, everyone.
Take care.
Take care, stay safe.